Ever wondered what the real cost of convenience is in our digital world? Tim Jensen, host of Intentionally Inconvenient, dares to question if convenience is truly the enemy of privacy. You'll explore the essence of privacy, why it's worth pursuing, and debunk the myth that it's a lost cause. Together, you will challenge the notion of, I have nothing to hide, and reveal why every bit of your information matters. Remember, all hope is not lost. It's time to reclaim your privacy in this intentionally inconvenient reality.
Hello and welcome to Intentionally Inconvenient, where we talk about personal freedom through securing your privacy. My name is Tim Jensen and I'm your host. Now, in our last episode, we talked about password managers and why you should use one, why I use one. Today, I'm going to discuss all about two-factor authentication, or also known as multi-factor authentication. 2FA is what it's short for, or you might hear MFA. It's a very important step in my privacy model. It has helped me prevent my social media accounts from being taken over by hackers. I told a story a few episodes ago on how I received a text message at 2:45 in the morning from an Indiana phone number asking me if I would give them the two-factor code. And the minute I would have done that, I would have lost that account forever. Same thing happened to me with my with another account where I was getting email codes being sent to me as people are trying to log in, and then it asks for that two-factor code and they can't get in because they don't have access to my email address. Two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication has prevented the loss of my social media accounts, which in and of itself may not be a big deal, but there's so much personal information that we put in our social media accounts that it can leave us very vulnerable. It could leave me very vulnerable had they taken those accounts over. So I highly recommend that we use as many layers of privacy as we need to in order to prevent things like our online accounts from being taken over or compromised. Let me give you a real-world example on how for many, many years, two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication has been in society. When you use a credit card or a debit card and you have to do a point-of-sale transaction at a retail store or even online, some other piece of information is required of you in order to process that transaction. Maybe it's a PIN of 4 digits or 6 digits or whatever. Maybe it's that 3 little digit code on the back of your card. Called a CVC code. It could be your zip code that you have to enter in that confirms that it's really you because you know where you live. All three of these are good examples of two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication in action. You need to provide a physical factor, which is that card, and then you also need the knowledge factor, the CVC, the zip code, or the PIN, in order to process the transaction. When it comes to online accounts, there are various methods which are used today. Your first factor is usually something you know. For instance, your username and password. We've discussed passwords at great length in past episodes. And quite frankly, in an upcoming episode, we're going to talk about that username because that's a key factor. It's always that first level of security, that first layer of security that for some reason, and I've been guilty of this myself, we use that same username everywhere because, hey, I'm always known as whatever at every address that I'm at. That's actually a very poor choice when it comes to your privacy and security online. By using that same username everywhere, it's just a matter of then guessing the password where also people use the same password everywhere. Now I've got your username that you use everywhere and your password that you use everywhere. I've got two keys that I can unlock the door with. So we'll talk about usernames in a different episode. Second factor is something that you are. First factor, remember, is something you know. Second factor is something you are. Maybe it's your thumbprint, what we call biometrics, or it recognizes your face, the facial recognition. Maybe it's your voice print. It recognizes your voice. So that's something you are. Now, with artificial intelligence, That's becoming weaker and weaker, but for now, we're still okay, I think, for a while anyway. But just be careful that you have other options available. Maybe it's not something that you are, maybe it's something you have. So a text message that you get a 6-digit code from, or an email-based 6-digit code. Those are about the weakest ones that I can think of. Maybe you get a push-based, where it pushes a code to your phone where you're logged into your Gmail or something, and then it can then send that code directly to your phone because you're already logged into your Gmail. Maybe it's an authentication or Authenticator app, and that application on your phone will every 30 seconds recycle a different code. It's a time-based code, and it's based on an algorithm that's proprietary to the provider of the Authenticator app. So there's no way for us to know what that algorithm is because it's different with every company. Maybe it's a hardware key, like a YubiKey. I have this YubiKey here. I also have another YubiKey. I put them on key rings. That's something you have. That's probably the most secure way to secure your accounts, because the person has to physically have that key with them. It's not something you can hack into. It's not a software you can crack. They can't break the encryption. They have to have the key. They have to have the physical key in their possession with them in order to use it. So to me, that's probably the most secure. Now, as of recently, within the last several months of this recording, and I'm recording this in March of 2024, there's something new called Passkeys that by many people are saying that it's extremely secure, maybe the most secure. I'm withholding my opinions for a while till I use it more, just to see how I think it is and what I'm hearing as far as other people's stories, because that third-party validation really is kind of where I think it's important. So something you are, something you have, another one, and this one is much more rare. We don't see this very often, but somewhere that you are. It's location-based. A lot of times that's used in more secure situations where it's the multi-factor, where maybe you have to log in with username and password, and then you use that second factor, but then you use the third factor that says, okay, you are physically located at work in your building, so we know that it's really you and that you're not off halfway across the world. Again, that's extremely rare. I don't see that very often. Now, this concept of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is another example of a concept that we've talked about in previous episodes, and that is using layers of privacy. The more layers that a hacker has to go through, the more difficult it is for them to hack into your account. They're going to go after the low-hanging fruit. They're going to pass you by because they'll see that second factor or that third factor and to be like, I don't want to mess with this. There are other fish to fry. There are other ways, other people that I can steal from. They're going to move on. And that's what you want, is you want layer after layer after layer of privacy. Privacy is always more secure in layers, or what some people call factors, that first factor, second factor, and so forth. So let's talk a little bit more. I'm not going to go do a how-to on how to use all these things. That's not the purpose of this video. We can do that in separate videos down the road. But let's discuss second factors specifically, because we've already discussed the basic foundation of that first factor, the usernames and the password, which, like I said, we'll get to the usernames in another video. And we've already discussed passwords. But that second factor, the SMS code, SMS is a short messaging system, which is text messaging, or email codes. These are time-based that you receive. They're usually expire in 10 minutes. To me, that gives a hacker 10 minutes to get into your account once they get it. And if they can beat you to the punch, well, they're in. They don't even need to steal your phone to be able to get in, because it came through your email. And if they're already logged into your email, you're out of luck. So those are, to me, the least secure. Another term you may have heard is called a SIM swap. That's where a hacker calls into a cell phone company and they say, hey, look, this is so-and-so, and I destroyed my SIM. Somehow they lost it or they destroyed it. Can you please send me another one? So yeah, we can send you one. Sure, we'll send you one. And all of a sudden they now have taken over your phone number, and now all those two-factor codes come to their phone, which is using that new SIM. So that's called a SIM swap. They're swapping, and all of a sudden they're taking over your cell phone and all of your two-factor codes. And all they need to do that is one time, and you may lose that account forever. And then you're really stuck, especially if it's your email account or, whatever, your financial accounts. Next one would be a push-based, as in they're pushing it to your device. You can use that if you're logged into Gmail, for instance, on your phone. They will push that second factor code and they'll say, someone just signed in from so-and-so. Was this you? Yes, this is me. No, this is not me. And there's a button that you can push. And that's called a push factor. Again, not overly secure, because if someone commandeers your email address, then they're logged in too, and then they've got it. And they can stay logged in forever. If you've ever used a service like Gmail or Yahoo, it can be logged in all the time, which is extremely insecure and leaves you very vulnerable. Again, another topic for another time, but it's a push-based second factor. Another one's biometrics. It can do your face, it can do your phone, or your thumbprint, or your fingerprint. Now, this is a little bit more secure because it's a little harder to copy. It's possible, but it's a little harder to copy or steal. The thing that I get concerned about with biometrics is that, let's say you're going through airport security, or let's say you get pulled over and someone wants to view your phone and they have a suspicion that you are using your phone for some kind of nefarious reason, whatever that is, some kind of illegal reason. They can require you to use your thumbprint or use your face. They can put it in front of your face to unlock your phone, and now they can get into your phone. Now, they have to have reasonable cause. They have to have a reasonable belief that you did something wrong in order to do that, but they can use your biometrics. Legally, I've never heard of a case where they can get into your phone by forcing you to put in your password, by forcing you to put in your PIN. So biometrics also can be breached if you're not careful. The next one would be an Authenticator application. Those are a little bit more secure, but there's also some dangers with those. For instance, most Authenticators apps are locked down to that phone, so they don't need to be attached to the internet. They don't need to be attached to your cell phone towers. It's time-based, so every 30 seconds it just rotates and changes the code. That does not require an internet connection of any kind or a cellular connection. So in that regard, it's more secure yet because it's with you and it's on the phone and whatnot. The danger with that is, what happens if you crack your screen? What happens if your phone is stolen? You just lost your ability to get that second factor. Now, there's ways around that. You can have two devices and they both are logged in there with your Authenticator app. There's a danger with that too, because anybody can duplicate it if they have that ability. Hackers. I don't know. I've been told that that's possible. So what I use for my Authenticator app is a YubiKey 5CI, the letter C, the letter I. What that does is you can store up to 32 Authenticator code accounts on this. You plug it in. It's an app you download onto your phone. You plug this in. You have to have both pieces. You have to have the app on the phone and you have to have the YubiKey. You plug that into your phone. You can use it with iPhone. There's an iPhone tip there, and you can also use it with an Android. It's a USB-C tip. And then you can even take an adapter, plug that into the USB-C, and now you can use this on a USB-A, which is what most computers have. So it's very versatile, and you can put adapters on there, but then it stores up to 32 Authenticator codes for 32 different accounts that you may have. So, and then make 2 copies of this, have them stored in separate places. One can be with you, and one could be not at your house, but stored somewhere else. Or it can be in a safe. It's wherever you want it, just so you're protected in case of a theft or a fire or something like that. have more than one of these. You always want to have at least 2 options for your two-factor authenticator. Two-factor authentication, pardon me. You always want to make 2. You can maybe use a YubiKey and an Authenticator app, or 2 YubiKeys and 2 Authenticator apps. In this case, I think it's okay. Again, you're creating what's called redundancy for these second factors, so you have options. Because maybe you forgot this at home, but you can use the app on your phone. Multi-factor authentication and 2-factor authentication is not foolproof. Session tokens are stored on devices so that you can stay logged into an account essentially forever without having to be re-logging in or re-putting a password in or putting a second code in again. There's a lot of accounts where you can just stay logged in forever. Password stealers or cookie stealers or software token stealers are real software that hackers use, and they can steal those session tokens. Then they put them on their computer, and all of a sudden, it's just as though they're logged in as you. Now they've bypassed your username and your password and your second factor because they have these password stealers. They have these cookie stealers, the software stealers. They can steal all this stuff. And that's a problem. So here's what I recommend. When you're done with your session, and this is a real pain, this is a real hassle, this is intentionally inconvenient, but absolutely necessary. Always log out. It's a pain, it's a hassle, it's intentionally inconvenient. But when you always log out of accounts, when you're done with that session, they have to log back in. There is no way for them to steal those session tokens, and that's a big deal. Always log out. So other tips and ideas, unless you absolutely have to, I recommend avoiding text message based or SMS based 2-factor authentication. Again, because of the SIM swap, it's very insecure. When using Authenticator apps, be cautious about which ones that you use. Some are more reliable than others. Google's a good one. There's Aegis, I think it's called, Aegis, or however you pronounce that. The YubiKeys are very secure because you have to physically have the keys with you. Those are pretty good. If you don't recognize the name in your Play Store or your iPhone App Store, chances are it may actually be a stealer software, stealer logs software. It may be stealing your personal information. It might be stealing your serial number of your phone or your IMEI, which, by the way, you can't change until you change phones. Very important that you don't get that taken. So if you can avoid text message or SMS-based or email-based for that matter, and when using Authenticator apps, make sure you are careful about which ones you use and which ones you avoid. I can put a list of those in the show notes of which ones I recommend, but there's a lot I would avoid, and I'm not going to name them because they'll change names all the time. Make sure with the Authenticator apps that it's an application where you can move your codes to another device, and that's not easy to do. Another thing with the Authenticator applications, make sure that you can move your data to another device. You don't want to be locked into just one device. You want to be able to transfer stuff to other devices, and not all of these applications are will allow you to do that. That's another reason why when you are establishing your 2-factor codes, have both devices, or as many devices as you want to put this on, with you at the same time, so you can scan the QR code and save it, and then the next one, scan the QR code and save it, and so forth, as many times as you need to. Do that all in one sitting so that you have it on multiple devices. Again, we want redundancy so you don't make yourself vulnerable by only having it on one device. Because if you do that and you lose access to that device for whatever reason, whether it's a broken phone screen or you lose your YubiKey, you need alternatives so you don't get locked out of those accounts. That can leave you very vulnerable. I personally, as I said before, I prefer the hardware keys. The YubiKeys is the one that I use. And the reason why I prefer the hardware keys, because they can't copy it. Nobody can copy it. They have to physically have that key in their possession in order to get in. I do like biometrics, but too many organizations now probably have your biometric information. The concern with biometrics is that the government officials can force you to use those biometrics to unlock your phones, which they can't force you to use a password, to the best of my knowledge. That may have changed since this recording. Authenticator applications, they use a proprietary algorithm. So I can't even tell you what the algorithm is because every company has a slightly different one. It's per company that it's used for those one-time password codes. They use different algorithms, mathematics. There are some authenticator apps that are really just fake, so that you will give up personally identifying information. They're just fake. They're not real apps. And unfortunately, by the time you give your information, they phone home and it's gone. So be careful that you use trusted name brands. Many people teach to just use an authenticator app that's part of your password manager. Again, we want to keep these separate from each other. You can use your password manager for the two-factor authentication, but the minute that hacker cracks that open and uses that, now you lost another factor. You've lost another layer. So keep them separate. I believe it's important to keep things separate. You should not use it in conjunction with a password manager. I do set them up on multiple devices as much as I can. This is a convenience thing, but it's also more importantly a redundancy thing. There are some authenticator apps that will require you to log in using a biometric or using a password. Use those and log out when you're done. Don't just leave them open forever, because if someone grabs and steals your phone, they can get into your two-factor. Now you're in trouble. The more advanced YubiKeys, they have the ability to do the 32 codes. That's very helpful. Okay, let's review, and then we will wrap this up. Two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication has been around in society for many, many years, many decades, for your security in the credit card industry. Most people are not aware about how common it is and how common it has been. There are 3 different layers so far that we've talked about. Something that you know, like your username and your password. Something that you are, or something that you have. Something you are would be biometrics, like a fingerprint or a facial scan. Something that you have would be the text message or SMS codes, your email codes, a push code to your phone, an Authenticator application, a Passkey, or a hardware key. Those are all things that you have. And then the most rare and you rarely will use it is somewhere that you are. It's location based. Some factors are more secure than others. I prefer the hardware key because it cannot be used by anyone unless they physically have it with them. Passkeys are newer, so I'm kind of withholding judgment, but so I've used them and they're very convenient. You can keep them in your password manager, and I've done that, and I am admitting to that on this channel. But just remember the risk and the vulnerability you leave when it's all in one, because convenience is the enemy of privacy. Separate your second factor from your password manager if you can, and always have 2 or more options for two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. If you don't, you could be locked out of your account if the one option fails you for whatever reason, whether you lose it or whether you crack your cell phone screen and you can't see it. Always have more than one option. You don't want to be locked out of all those accounts. So that's it for today on two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. Again, my name is Tim Jensen. This is Intentionally Inconvenient, reminding you to stay safe and stay private. Thanks for listening.
That's all for now from Intentionally Inconvenient, leaving you with a challenge to question the cost of online convenience. If you want to keep learning, subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Your reviews and 5-star ratings help reach more listeners. Until next time, remember, your privacy is never a lost cause. Stay safe, Stay private.